We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on a Saturday. Congratulations. You made it through that Monday through Friday grind, and you are here with us live on rumble.com/amradpod on a Saturday grab bag edition. If you have not already, be sure to give us a nice thumbs up, follow the channel, subscribe if your heart compels you to do that. If you want to check us out on iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, just the audio only, be sure to subscribe there so you get the automatic show updates every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and leave us a 5-star rating, a 5-star review. You can also find us on YouTube, on X at X America News, at Real Steve Friend, and at GOB Actual. So as the aforementioned title goes, today is Saturday, a tradition like no other. We're going to be doing a Saturday grab bag edition. We got lots of different stories from all across the board, things that might have eluded your attention. Going to have a fun discussion about the FBI firings that happened over the last couple of days. I'm not going to belabor it too long. I think it's been covered down, but we'll give you our unique perspective and experience on this. Maybe bring some blasts from the past, things that you might have forgotten about. We're also going to talk about communists helping illegals escape from custody. California is legalizing child trafficking. Karen is curious as to whether or not her long-term husband is bisexual. The Oklahoma superintendent of schools is accused of watching pornography, and then, shocker, the left was wrong again. What is the point of funding the United Nations? I'll dive into how that organization is funded and how little it actually does and how little people really even appreciate the little that it does. And then we'll have to close it out with some climate paganism and a spiritual revival, a discussion about Buddhist take on the sun monster. So, like I said, a whole bunch to get to today. Excited to get to it all. But before we do, let's thank the show's underwriting sponsor of the day, and that's going to be the M-Clip Company. M-Clip is where you can go. M-Clip. And when you do, you can use our promo code SUSPENDABLE, SUSPENDABLE, and that'll get you 10% off of these luxury made in America money clips. They're really cool, guys. I've had mine for a long time, lifetime guarantee. Even when I messed it up, I sent it back. They fixed it. No questions asked. You get your initials on there. You can get your favorite Major League Baseball team. You're down now as it's the dog days of summer. You can also get the Suspendables line that has our upside down badge. Remember, as always, eagle down for an agency in distress. Has the logo, and you can get everything store-wide if you use that promo code SUSPENDABLE when you go to m-clip.com. All right, let's begin with the FBI. I know I've had lots of discussions over the last couple of days with fellow Suspendables offline and then as well online. Did a Friendly Friday edition with the Kyle Seraphin show yesterday. Also was with Owen Schroyer on Thursday discussing these details. So let's go to the source. And today's source is going to be the Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness. And they've got a nice and pretty picture of one Brian Driscoll. So from the piece, as background to memorialize it, Brian Driscoll, who served as the acting head of the Bureau during the first weeks of the Trump second term before the confirmation of Kash Patel, was dismissed by senior leaders this week. During his brief tenure at the top, Driscoll had earned the respect of much of the FBI's rank and file after he stood up to demands from then acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove that he identify those involved in the investigation of January 6, 2021, and as the WAPO describes it, the attack on the United States Capitol. And agents feared was a precursor to a widespread purge. I wish their fears had been well-founded, but they weren't indeed, because Brian Driscoll held the line somewhat. He refused to hand over that list because the incoming Trump administration over at the Department of Justice, the best that I can ascertain, they had the wrong assumption that it was probably a few dozen people who worked on January 6th straight out of Washington field office, because that would have made sense by the policy. Typically, when you open a case, it's because the crime or alleged crime happened in a specific area. That becomes the area of responsibility. That field office takes ownership of it. Now, I mean, there's other exceptions for it. I mean, let's say that there's an ongoing criminal enterprise and their main headquarters is based in Jacksonville, Florida, but they're going all over the country and they're committing violent acts or something to that effect. Well, the act might have occurred in St. Louis, Missouri, but it makes sense to open the case in Jacksonville because most of the investigation is going to be going on there. Kind of getting into the details and leading you down the rows of this is exactly what I became a whistleblower over, because the way January 6th was handled, we opened a separate case instead of one case. We opened a different case for every single person, turning one case into 2,500 plus, and then on paper assigning them around the country. So we boost the overall terrorism numbers. We gave every single field office a banner year, or actually they got totals added over 4 years of domestic terrorism stats because those cases kept going on and on and on. And look, new sheriff in town, Trump administration comes in, they wind up pardoning everybody associated with January 6th. And then they wanted accountability, because I think the American people, certainly those who sent the mandate last November when they voted in the general election for Donald Trump to return for a second term in office, the mandate was, we do not want a weaponized federal law enforcement apparatus that is interested in outcomes, political outcomes, rather than focusing down on the process and the two-tiered system of justice, where if you want to go out and burn down a city for Black Lives Matter, it's a-okay. The FBI won't get involved. After all, that's just local crime. But if you happen to take a guided tour of the Capitol or stand on the outside of the Capitol, as some people were charged, well, then the FBI is coming for you, and they'll send a tactical team to your front door at 6 o'clock in the morning to traumatize you and your children, destroy your reputation. And even if it didn't proceed to a gulag in Washington, D.C., you had to hire a attorney. You could lose your job, have your reputation besmirched. The process was the punishment. And we wanted accountability for that, because if somebody raises their hand and swears before God Almighty to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, there's a pesky element of that called due process. You actually have to stand for that. But so many didn't. So many just followed orders. So the incoming Trump administration was concerned, and they thought maybe it's a few dozen bad actors, but mostly it's the good men and women of the FBI. But it was like 6,000 people who worked on January 6th. It was massive. And Brian Driscoll, as the acting director, refused to turn over that list, at least initially. Eventually, they gave the list over, but they had the names redacted. They gave like a unique employee ID, UEID number, so that the people could be, I don't know, judged by the Attorney General's office without actually knowing their identities. But it's pretty easy to cross-reference that and find out who did what. We don't know what the status of that investigation is right now. It's yet again one of these outstanding promises, these deliverables that have not arrived during the Kash Patel, Dan Bongino era at the FBI. So they let Brian Driscoll go. Before we get to the reason for that, Brian Driscoll became a cult hero. They actually made this challenge coin for him. It said, "What would Drizz do?" This is the person that's standing in the gap. This is the hashtag resistance against the incoming administration, the incoming director. And yet they went there and arrived and said, well, most people are good. They just need to have rigorous obedience to the Constitution, the default setting restored, and we will get back to cops being cops. But that didn't happen. Now, why did Brian Driscoll get escorted out Friday? Well, it wasn't because of the January 6th resistance. When I say we, the Suspendables cautioned Kash Patel about Brian Driscoll. He was in charge of the hostage rescue team, and they're still adjudicating whether or not HRT went down to Mar-a-Lago. Pretty confident they did. We told Kash about that. We told him about this resistance, and we were assured that no, he's actually a good guy. So once he took the helm and Brian Driscoll was supposed to go back to his previous assignment, the special agent in charge of the Newark office, no, he was actually promoted. He became the assistant director over CIRG, which stands for Critical Incident Response Group. Now, part of CIRG is the pilot program. The agents and FBI employees who fly around for surveillance purposes, for retrieval of evidence, or for shuttling the FBI director and now deputy director all across the country or halfway around the world to New Zealand. Kash Patel just popped up there recently. And my buddy, Kyle Seraphin, determined that Chris Meyer, who was the pilot, was actually the case agent on the Mar-a-Lago raid. Now, that was one of the worst examples of weaponization that we had in recent memory, and it was just a slap in the face to know that that guy was now rubbing elbows with the director. So Kyle put that out. It went kind of viral and reached the ears of the 7th floor over at the Hoover Building. So they called in Brian Driscoll and said, fire that man. And yet again, what would Drizz do? He said no. So as a result, now he's out on his butt. Now, in addition to Brian Driscoll and Chris Meyer, the pilot, we had other firings, which the Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness, gets to. And that is one Stephen Jensen, the J6 warlord who we were reliably told did exactly what the American people should expect of him. And don't take my word for it, take the FBI director's word.
But you promoted Stephen Jensen, the architect of the FBI's overzealous January 6th investigation.
I want the American public to realize what we did. That man was in a position where he literally fought back against the machine who was saying, we want to politicize this event. We want to politicize this event. And at the end of the day, remember, Maria, there's a chain of command here. So you can fight back your chain of command to a certain degree before they fire you. And Steve Jensen and other folks were promoted because they embody what the American public demands of FBI agents.
He kind of lost momentum at the end there because he realized that he was about to say, and just followed orders, which is not acceptable, never acceptable. You're actually trained to not just follow orders that are immoral, unethical, illegal, unconstitutional. But Stephen Jensen was a yes man. He was promoted over out to Quantico after he was the section chief of the Domestic Terrorism Operations Section, the warlord, the architect of the FBI's response to January 6th. Then became the special agent in charge of Columbia, South Carolina, and then was promoted to assistant director in charge of the Washington field office. Well, now he's finally out on his butt. Took them long enough. I mean, I guess better late than never. They could have done it 5 or 6 months ago and avoided all the embarrassment, but I'm a bottom line guy, so I guess the ball's in their court. They could do what is best for the organization and follow things like the suggestions my buddies and I make, or they could get embarrassed publicly and humiliated and push back on through social media. It takes so much heat that they just wind up doing it. It's really up to them at this point. Now, that's not the only firing that was covered down by media. Certainly, we have some expertise on those guys, but I had to do my research on this other one where there's a very sympathetic piece that comes from MSNBC about high-ranking FBI job losses, and they're disproportionately hurting women and people of color. This is a play on the New York Times. Asteroid to hit tomorrow, destroy Earth, women and minorities affected worst. Now, as MSNBC puts down here, an unprecedented campaign by FBI leaders to force senior bureau officials out of their jobs has disproportionately hit women and people of color. FBI leaders last week forced the resignation of a decorated female Pakistani American counterterrorism agent who was appointed in February to run the Salt Lake City field office. I believe she was appointed before Kash Patel became the director. It's almost like a last-minute thing that Brian Driscoll did. And they like to hear that as of last year, women comprised 21% of the heads of the field offices. There were 56 last year. There's now 55. And that's up from 7% in 2002. So roughly quarter century, they've gone from 7% to 21%. And yet females are around 10%. So it seems like they're overrepresented, but MSNBC doesn't want you to know that detail. I'm not going to belabor that because MSNBC is a communist rag. But what I do want to focus on is this decorated female Pakistani American. And I did my research. There it is, the press release, which came out February 5th. Kash Patel became the director February 20th. So Brian Driscoll for the win, promoting this chick whose name I will butcher and I will not apologize for. Her name is Maytab Saeed, and she became the special agent in charge of the Salt Lake City field office. She replaced the woman who approved the SWAT team going and killing the guy who, quote unquote, threatened Joe Biden. But what is Maytab Saeed's background? She is, after all, not totally 100%, not a DEI hire. She's decorated. She knows lots about counterterrorism. And the funny thing about these press releases is if you have the patience to read through them, it's not that hard. It'll take you maybe 2 or 3 minutes. You can find out all of the answers to how qualified, how meritorious, how decorated somebody like Maytab Saeed actually is. So what's her deal? Well, Saeed entered the FBI as a special agent in August 2005. So she's been there about 20 years. She was assigned to the New York field office, the largest field office, so she could hide in a herd and not actually have to do anything by herself. That's how New York field office works. You're a member of a squad. Your job might be you email out subpoenas, nothing specific. She worked counterterrorism investigations and was a member of the crisis negotiation team, which talks down people who are apparently suicidal, doesn't do that well at it. And she was part of the rapid deployment team that's related to terrorism. That's 2005. Well, how long was she in that post? Did she spend a grisly decade there stopping terrorist attacks from affecting the Big Apple, protecting New York City? We, after all, don't want another 9/11. This is in 2005. Same president was there, George W. Bush. She held the line until 2008. Which, subtracting from FBI Academy time, means she was there roughly 2 years. Barely a minimum. The bare minimum is normally 5 or 6 years before you start this process, but she's very meritorious, very decorated, totally not a DEI hire. So she got elevated within 2 years. 2008, Saeed deployed to Islamabad, Pakistan, and served as the acting assistant legal attaché. Was acting, but she was there for like 2 years. So kind of permanent. The legal attaché, the legat, as it's called in FBI parlance, is basically an overseas deployment. The FBI sets up offices all around the world to liaise with locals, to provide for if there's a need, American interests overseas. Let's say there's a American who it gets into some sort of legal trouble. Let's say there's somebody who commits a crime in America and they flee overseas. Well, that would be the legal attaché's responsibility to work with the local law enforcement there to perhaps bring that person into custody. But Pakistan's not really a great ally. She is Pakistani. I think she got a government-sponsored trip home. But let's see, maybe she picked up some more bona fides along the line because ALAT, assistant legal attaché, and that's a pretty plum assignment. That's something you put on your resume, and now you're cooking with rocket fuel. You are a blue flamer, as they're called. These are the people that are shooting up so fast, promoting through the chain of command so quickly that the flames shooting out the back end of the thruster of their metaphorical rocket is turning blue with heat. Further, she was there in 2008, but then she was assigned to an 18-month temporary duty assignment at the Counterterrorism Division at FBI headquarters in 2012. She got a promotion. She is now in the management class. I mean, ALAT is technically management class as well, but she was an assistant, so it was an acting assistant. So I guess the argument would be that she technically wasn't in leadership or management until 2012. So that tracks with the 6 to 7 year time period, even if she was filling in that role. So she did her 18 months at headquarters for the Counterterrorism Division, where she was a program manager, the lowest person on the rung, not making any decisions at all. And then 3 years later, April 2015, she reported again to the legal attaché in Amman, in Turkey. She was again the assistant legal attaché, but no longer acting. So she's doing some overseas travel yet again to a second legat. Ms. Saeed returned to the New York field office as a supervisor on the Joint Terrorism Task Force in 2017. So she spent 2 years in Turkey, then came back to the grand old USA, back to her original field office. And was she setting down firm roots there in New York? Well, she was promoted to acting assistant special agent in charge in New York And now we're getting to the GS 1415 range. And she dealt with extraterritorial branches in 2020. Again, looking outside the United States from within a domestic law enforcement agency. November 2020. What was going on in November 2020? Oh, that's right. There was an election that a lot of people had concerns about. Well, what happened there? Because the FBI just assured us that there was no malfeasance whatsoever. And if you had any questions, you were probably an anti-government, anti-authority, violent extremist. November 2020, Saeed was selected as the assistant special agent in charge of cyber and counterintelligence in Newark, just across the river. And she has no background in cyber, no background in counterintelligence, but she should be in charge of the city that's across the street from New York. 2022, just 2 years later, she was promoted to section chief of the China Operations Branch of Counterintelligence Division in FBI headquarters. She's Pakistani, has experience in Pakistan and Turkey, but apparently she now has knowledge of the counterintelligence realm of China. She's, after all, decorated. April 2023, right away promoted, Saeed served as a special agent in charge of cyber counterintelligence in Los Angeles. She's a special agent in charge, but LA has an assistant director in charge. She was not at the helm of leadership. And then eventually, under Brian Driscoll, Miss Saeed was promoted to special agent in charge of Salt Lake City. And what is her background even? I mean, did she come in with just unbelievable education, with experiences that would just shock the mind? No, before becoming a special agent for the FBI, Miss Saeed was a contract linguist for a year. She speaks Pakistani. So she's a girl boss and decorated. And now she's out on her ass. And I will play a sad song for her on the world's smallest violin. Well, actually, you won't see that because I don't have hands if you're tracking with the American Radicals podcast. That's a long-term look at the FBI firings. Now, the question is, what are they doing outside of just letting people go? Is that going to hurt the mission? Are they involved in other things that are worth the time and the resources and the patience of the American people? It's been close to 6 months now. We were told to wait 6 to 8 months. Where are the big arrests? Where are the big takedowns? We need more than just the random posts from the deputy director on X. Well, now we're finding out that the FBI might be involved in helping the state of Texas pursue Democrats from the state house who fled so that they didn't have to vote on redistricting. And none other than the president of the United States was excited to bring us that information.
Texas Senator John Cornyn is asking for your help to force Democrats back to the state and hold them accountable. Do you want the federal government and the FBI to help locate and arrest these Texas Democrats who have left the state?
Well, I think they've abandoned the state. Nobody's seen anything like it, even though they've done it twice before. And in a certain way, it almost looks like they've abandoned the state. It looks very bad. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Should the FBI get involved? Should the FBI get involved?
Well, they may have to. They may have to. No, I know they want them back. Not only the attorney general, the governor wants them back. If you look, I mean, the governor of Texas is demanding they come back. So a lot of people are demanding they come back. You can't just sit it out. You have to go back. You have to fight it out. That's what elections are all about. Yeah, please.
So the president's weighing in on this one. Senator John Cornyn was recruiting the FBI to come and assist for reasons unknown. I mean, fleeing the state of Texas, I guess technically they crossed a state line, but the intent was to not have a quorum to vote in the state house. I don't think that's a federal crime. So why would the FBI get involved? What's the nexus to get involved? Well, other than that they can get nice headlines and do nice X posts about how they're really involved in the most important high-profile stuff going on right now. They're all too glad to get that opportunity. But what could they really do? Well, I suppose if there were criminal warrants that were issued from the state of Texas, the FBI might be able to do what's called a UFAP, UFAP, unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, where we prove that the individuals have left the state. We get sort of an idea of where they are. We take that local warrant, that state warrant, and say, look, we're attempting to help the local authorities do that. We're going to federalize this. This flight now becomes federalized. They've crossed state lines. We will go and help and arrest the person, bring them back. And as soon as that happens, typically You don't prosecute the person for unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. You dismiss the charges, you take the warrant out of the system, and then they're just in custody and they get charged with whatever the state charges are. Now, the FBI could do that. That's more of a U.S. Marshals thing. But I think I'd rather have the Texas Rangers doing it. Or I'd rather just not have the fake political drama that the FBI really, really wants to get in on to get off the X and off the spotlight of things like how they fumbled on Epstein and how they are now having to do mop-up duty about Brian Driscoll and Stephen Jensen. Well, they're going to jump all over that. Why are we giving that opportunity? Oh, because we're so back and we're so based. And we got to make sure that the leadership there looks competent, like they're really involved in things. But that's not what they should be focused down on. This is a redistricting dispute in the state of Texas, where they're arguing about gerrymandering. And that's been the subject of lots of different discussions all week long. I'm not going to belabor it. I'm not going to talk about it. But I want to talk about where we actually could focus the resources that the FBI has at its disposal, other than tracking down state legislators where you know exactly where they are. The Texas Rangers are adequate and sufficient to bring that in if they should so choose to do it. Where should we focus? Well, I found this piece over at Town Hall that talks about a new phone app that is helping tip off illegal aliens about ICE. So this comes from Town Hall. And it says a new app called Coqui, COQUI, offers live map-based alert system where users can anonymously report and bookmark sightings of ICE and police activity, relying entirely on community input. This app also provides tips for illegal aliens on how to handle encounters with ICE. So that would seem like there are now accomplices. It's a criminal conspiracy, if you ask me. I mean, this is an application. This is an overt act. Developing this application or setting it up, funding it, all of it. This is a criminal conspiracy to allow illegal aliens, people who have illegally crossed over our borders and entered our country in violation of our law, to help them evade capture. Certainly aiding in their obstruction of a government process, aiding in the obstruction of an official proceeding. 1512. Wouldn't that be delicious if the FBI went after it? They certainly went after grandmas who went to the Capitol saying that exact same argument. Why don't they energetically take that up? Plus, in addition to just being seemingly more in line with how that law could be interpreted, you'd have the added benefit of having the majority of the American people, the 77 million who voted in favor of kicking these millions of illegal aliens out of the country. You'd have them have your back, as opposed to being anti-American values, anti-Constitution, anti just a simple expectation that the government's going to do the very bare minimum of things that we want it to do, and that is to protect the border. But I haven't seen any announcements about that. No, they're way too busy worrying about Texas legislators who are not dangerous, and we know where they are. But we'll devote lots of manpower and resources to that, whereas we have 30 to 50 million illegal aliens in the country, and they're continuing to assist with the removal operations. But the funding, the complex financial crime aspect to it, which should be in the lane of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, no further information. I don't know what the status is of that. We haven't gotten a dispatch from the deputy director on his X account. And similarly, as long as we're talking about aiding and assisting and abetting illegal aliens, there was a different story that came from the New York Post. It's not just an app that's providing information saying, oh, watch out, they're around the corner from you. Maybe you should turn to the other direction. How about the actual physical act of helping someone escape from police custody, breaking in and pulling them out of prison? Well, the New York Post reports on that exact thing here, as the anti-ICE activists helped they call them illegal alien escape detention in Los Angeles, quote, out of control. Now, the details of this one, this was a British migrant, a British illegal alien, so you can't even accuse him of being racist. He was shackled as contract guards, not government employees. They were contractors. They walked him and other detainees into the ICE detention center for processing in Los Angeles. At one point, a masked man helped the illegal alien escape from custody when the guards weren't looking. Maybe they should do better on the vetting of these guards. The escape artist detainee was then loaded into a waiting van with the help of other protesters. So now we have another conspiracy. It wasn't just one masked person that committed a crime of opportunity, just happened to look around and realize that those contract guards were not paying attention and then just snatched this guy up. No, they had a van staged, a vehicle staged. Who owns that vehicle? Was that vehicle rented or purchased for this explicit purpose? Were there people standing around? Who was driving it? Where did it go? Did they have cell phones? Can we drop a register around that area and figure out which cell phones were in that area like they did around the Capitol? The geofence. Can we get that general warrant, since that was allowed in our nation's capital for people who were out exercising their First Amendment right to protest their government, to assemble, to speak, to have their grievances redressed by the Congress, to walk through the People's House, which is open 24 hours a day? And they were also invited in by police. We can drop a geofence warrant for that general warrant, which is supposed to be prohibited. Have we poked the FBI to do the exact same? Have we poked the DOJ to get in front of a judge and say, we need a warrant to know which cell phones were in the vicinity, helping and aiding an enemy of the United States of America, an illegal invader, escape custody? No further information. We're too busy worrying about personnel that they should have handled 6 months ago, as well as trying to get in on all the drama down in Texas. All right, let's pivot on this grab bag over to some other stuff. Been banging on the FBI too much. I don't know. I might have some more on later on, but I can't resist it. We'll have to go back to it. But for the time being, let's pivot over. And this piece comes from the Associated Press, and it's about Alligator Alcatraz, which is down in Florida. They erected it in like 3.5 days. I'm kind of questioning of whether or not illegal aliens helped to build it. But for now, an out-of-control judge has ordered temporary halt to the construction because they're building out Alligator Alcatraz. So there is now a federal judge who has weighed in and said that you cannot continue to build this structure because we exist in a time where the social compact is 100% broken. And judges apparently are the most powerful individuals here. And there's just too many milquetoast Republicans, allegedly conservative, who say, well, the black robe guys have spoken. I guess we just have to go along with it. We are in a broken system. We're in a cold civil war, and these judges are not legitimate. But what is the actual logic behind this? And I think it speaks to the nature of communism in the United States, which is effectively a way to commingle malcontents of all different stripes, all different motivations together. So if you were in favor of shutting down construction of Alcatraz, what, pray tell, would be your political driving factor? The logical one would be that you want all the illegal aliens to stay here. But that isn't why the construction was halted. From New York Post, environmental groups and the Mukasoki tribe have asked the judge to issue a preliminary injunction to halt operations and further construction. The suit claims the project threatens environmentally sensitive wetlands that are home to protected plants and animals and would reverse billions of dollars worth of environmental restoration. So here we have the malcontents, we have the climate pagans, and the Native American tribes who say that they're put upon, even though they get lots of money from the federal government. They've now joined forces to help with the illegal aliens. So you see how it works? They have no motivations to align together at all. They just hate you. They hate the system. And they found a sympathetic ear, another elite communist who's willing to use the choke point that he has as a federal judge appointed, lifetime appointment, and says, this is my fiefdom. This is my domain. I don't care if it comports with the law, the Constitution, basic common sense, or even the political mandate that a majority of voters last year sent when we sent Donald Trump back to the White House for the second time. Illegal aliens, deportations, that was the number one thing. I mean, it was maybe 1 and 1A with inflation, but it certainly was in the top 2. And yet the judge says, nope, my judgment is better than yours, and I'm going to use whatever mechanism possible. Whereas the conservative, the libertarian types, the system people say, well, the judge has spoken. We have to follow all the policies and the procedures. We could just do a pen stroke and restore Garrett O'Boyle back to duty as an FBI agent, or at the very least, turn on the pay period for him, very much like Brian Auten, Intel analyst who was part of the Russia collusion stuff, still sits on paid suspension. But, we have to follow the procedures. We have to follow the policies, and that could take 6 to 8 more months, whereas the communist judge just says you can't build it. Now, my press is here, continue to build it. Yeah, Judge, you and what army? You going to send the United States Marshal to come arrest me and stop me? Good thing that the Attorney General in the state of Florida, Utmeyer, is good buddies with the United States Marshal for that area. So let's actually put them for a decision and say, no, we refuse to comply with this unlawful, unimaginative communist order. Now, that's a mad judge in Florida, which I take quite a bit of umbrage with because we're supposed to be the America of America. I would expect that sort of judge to exist out in a place like California. So let's go out there and talk about just how bad they are, because they're legalizing child trafficking. True story. This comes from the California Family Council, and it details a Bill 495, AB, Alpha Bravo 495. It's the California Assembly Bill, which would allow any adult to take guardianship over any minor child with a simple form. The form would allow a non-related adult to go to a public school and seize control over any child without any proof of a familial relationship. You don't even have to be related to the person. The justification for this, because it's California and they're communists, is to allow children of illegal aliens who've been deported to stay in the U.S. So mom and dad get captured by ICE. We don't want to send the children along with them. We're going to willfully separate families. I thought that was a bad thing. But they want somebody who's not related to be able to take custody of the child so that they can stay in America. The bill, though, attempts to create this streamlined guardianship by allowing, quote, non-relative extended family members. I don't see how you could be a family member if you're not related, but it is California and they invent terms all the time. And that's defined broadly as anyone with a, quote, mentoring relationship to assume control over a child through a one-page affidavit. There is no review by the court. There's nothing required to be notarized. There's no parental consent required. You just print out the form, fill it out, show up to the school, and you can have a kid. And you can have a kid. And on the language issue, non-relative extended family member, I'm more interested in the other one. The definition where it says a mentoring relationship. How many times are we assured that the tranny kids need a good mentor in their life? A groomer, shall we say, somebody who understands what they're going through. They can help them navigate these very perilous waters on their journey to cutting off their penis and testicles to make sure that they, in fact, realize their true identity. This law goes on the books. It'll be used far more often for stuff like that, rather than keeping illegal alien families separated, rather than deporting them all as one family unit. Keep your eye on this one, because whatever starts in California moves over to Illinois. And, it probably catches on with a bunch of Democrat legislators from Texas and Illinois, and they bring it on down to the state house in Texas, where effectively the Democrats kind of run things because the speaker there is beholden to the Democrats. And once it gets out to Texas, it works its way out here to Florida. Hopefully at that point, we'll have alligator Alcatraz up and running. And if anybody tries to take a kid, we just toss him in the moat and let the alligators eat him. We'd be the only state to do that, though. Here on the grab bag, let's pivot over now as we're talking about the tranny stuff in California, where they're going to take kids and allow someone to print off a document and then just take guardianship of them. Well, so many times these kids, they're just tossed down their butts because apparently, at least from the communist mindset, they just get booted because they say, I'm a dude who feels pretty, which leads to homelessness, which also leads to the city of New York spending money on homeless shelters for specifically the transgender, the LGBTQIA rainbow kamikaze. So reporting from one of my favorite named websites, even though the content is super woke, that's The Gothamist. And it reports on the first of its kind, first in the nation, homeless shelter for transgender people. We're shattering glass ceilings all around. Unprecedented. This is wonderful, according to The Gothamist. The details are, officials say it's the only city-funded shelter of its kind in the country. It's going to help 150 trannies in New York as the Trump administration has rolled back rights for the trans community. Really? What rights? Name them. It's barred access to medical care. Oh, you mean the ability to mutilate yourself in contravention to the Hippocratic Oath where it says do no harm, but I guess if you want to cut off your penis and have a hole down there which cannot be sewn shut, that's apparently acceptable. Also, military service and federal documents that reflect their gender identity, because we're not going to let the mentally handicapped enter military service and have access to firearms and tanks and airplanes and missiles. We think that that's probably not a good idea. That's a taking away their rights. You don't have a right to be in the military. And your federal document is a accurate representation of who you are. And if you're a dude who feels pretty, you're still a dude. The city is fully funding the facility in Long Island City, which will cost $65 million. And it's going to be open for the next 5 years. And if you happen to find yourself as a tranny in New York City and you are one of the 150 people who go to this shelter, you will have the benefit of a personal psychiatrist, culinary classes so you can learn to bake. You're going to get a GED class if you want to graduate high school, and they're going to help you find a job. Maybe I should say I'm a dude who feels pretty. I'm in need of a job. Maybe they could help. Maybe I could do it remotely. They are, after all, very tech savvy up in the Big Apple. You know, and on the Big Apple, if they're not helping the trannies learn how to cook and giving them free housing for the next 5 years, they are virtue signaling and asking some very uncomfortable questions. So I want to go to the New York Times Magazine. I'll say it anyway, at one point, a newspaper. And this is from a column called The Ethicist. It's basically like a Dear Abby sort of thing. This individual wrote in, said, I have always wondered if my husband is bisexual. Is it okay to ask him? This is back to the episode we did a couple ago where we talked about the madness. These are people writing into the New York Magazine, which is ostensibly a credible news source, asking these sorts of questions, and they're being fielded by quote unquote experts on ethics. And let's dig in. Here's the submission. Quote, my husband and I married in 1992. We were both around 30 years old. Each of us had had previous sexual partners of the opposite gender, so they seemed to be heterosexual, both of them. Although his heterosexuality was questioned in his discernment process for ordination of the church rejected him because they said, dude, you're gay. He was always adamant that he was not gay. He and I engaged in sexual intercourse for 7 years, which would put them to 1999, party like it's 1999. Not often and not pleasant for me. And then around 25 years ago, he said he would spare me any further requests for sex. And we have done nothing more than snuggle and cuddle since then. This has been fine with me, as I never really enjoyed sex. For a number of years, I have wondered if he is bisexual and if what we have is a, quote, lavender marriage. How might I broach this subject after all these years? And for obvious reasons, she withheld her name because she doesn't want to be identified. Except she does, right? Why would this individual, why would this Karen write to the New York Magazine and ask this question? Well, before we get to that, what was the response from the ethicist, which I kind of agree with? Not going to lie. The response was, it sounds as if both of you have found a kind of peace, one that may not fit every cultural script about marriage, but seems to work for you. Hey, different strokes for different folks. Curiosity about a partner's interior life is natural, but for many people is a desire to keep some things to oneself. You don't ask this dude if he likes other dudes. because you have a comfortable existence. He's not looking, apparently, to step out on you and move on to, I don't know, pursue the Rear Admiral, Pete Buttigieg. Why would you ask him that? Well, because she's a Karen and she lives in New York. And she knows if she's in a lavender marriage, which I didn't know was a thing until I read it, she'll get to brag to all her friends at brunch about being in a lavender marriage because they don't have any kids. She can't cut their genitals off and brag. She's a member of the worst people on earth, but she's without children, which means that she still qualifies.
Classic awful. AWFL, affluent white female liberals. They're a scourge.
Let's move on. Let's go to a story from The Independent, who's trying to dunk on the superintendent of schools in Oklahoma. That's Ryan Walters. He's kind of one of these up-and-coming political stars. He's not afraid to do things like require the Bible be in every classroom. And The Independent really, really wants to get him for violating his own principles. So they wrote this story about pornography being on the television of the Oklahoma superintendent's office. Now, the piece says Oklahoma's Trump-loving top school official, known for mandating Bibles in every classroom, is now facing an investigation after naked women were seen on TVs, at least they're women, in his office. According to reports, what should have been a mundane Oklahoma State Board of Education executive session turned shocking after board members saw naked women appear on a TV screen behind Ryan Walters. Now, the board members include Becky Carson. She attended the meeting and said, quote, she was disturbed by what she saw on TV. Another board member, Ryan Detheridge, stated, quote, quite frankly, I didn't know how to handle it. I was just in shock. I was being human and I didn't know what to think. I kept thinking that it had just going to go away, and so I quit watching it. I'm sure he did. I'm sure he's a member of a lavender marriage. But is this accurate? Was there an actual investigation? Well, apparently there was. And apparently they determined that no, in fact, there wasn't pornography playing during a state school board meeting executive session. In fact, it was something quite different, and they brought the receipts. This is the video. Is trying to remember details from a porn film allegedly appearing on TV during their July 24th meeting.
I relate it maybe to Three's Company time frame, maybe MASH time frame. I could be off on that, but I'm just saying that was the kind of things. The style of the other clothing, that the ones that had clothes on, kind of reminded me of a wide red and white striped shirt. And one image I have in my mind is a guy's got a white hat, kind of a Gilligan type hat, a boonie type hat, I think you would call it, possibly.
So the first one, Ryan Detheridge told me that he saw images of naked women on this TV screen out of the corner of.
We can stop it there. Basically, they had Fox News on. And because of the time overlap, they were able to go to Fox News and see that it was stories about the passing of Hulk Hogan, who was wrestling shirtless in the 80s. So it might match up with the description of it being kind of like MASH era. And the visible nipples, yeah, because Hulk Hogan didn't wear a shirt. Remember, he rips it off before he wrestles. So they attempted to dunk on Ryan Walters. In fact, it was just a nice tribute to the recently departed Hulk Hogan. All right, I teased the UN, and I think it's worth going into, even if we have to consider the source, because I think it's accurate on this one. And you could accuse me of being a stooge for Russia like the FBI did, like Stacey Plaskett did. This one comes from RT. Nobody reads UN reports, according to a UN report. In March, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres launched the UN 80 Task Force, a reform initiative aimed at reviewing how the Secretariat implements thousands of mandates and at reducing administrative overload. They want to cut all that red tape. According to a report released Thursday, the Secretariat published 1,100 reports last year. That's an increase of 20% in the last 35 years. And they had 27,000 meetings. Most of the 1,000 plus reports produced each year by the United Nations are barely read, according to a study that the UN did. So apparently, the UN did a study and realized that no one reads their reports or their studies. You can't write this stuff. It's a complete waste. I'm not in favor of eminent domain, except as it applies to the United Nations headquarters in New York City. Let's bulldoze that entire thing and turn it into a parking lot. We need more room for parking in New York City anyway. And that got me down a rabbit hole of how the United Nations is actually funded. So from the Pew Research Center, how the United Nations is funded and who pays the most. The U.S. recently launched several UN agencies, and that includes World Health Organization and the Human Rights Council. And we also plan to withdraw from UNESCO by the end of next year. In mid-July, Congress passed the Trump administration's rescissions package, and that claws back $1 billion approved for UN funding, and further cuts may be forthcoming. The administration's budget for fiscal year 2026 proposed ending UN peacekeeping payments and pausing most other United Nations contributions. Now, according to Pew Research, the amount each member of the United Nations pays is based on its, quote, capacity to pay. Well, you know what? We don't have a capacity to pay. If you paid attention to the American Radicals podcast back on Thursday, we have $151 trillion in debt. I would say that we have better areas where we should apply our money. And I did pull a couple graphics just to show what the UN is actually involved when it comes to funding. First one, US and China are the largest dues-paying members for the regular budget, and then for the peacekeeping budget, US, we contribute 22% of the total, 26% of the total. China right behind us at 20% and 23%. All the other countries seem to be freeloading on it. And then also just a political breakdown. It's not worth going into too much, other than the fact that people who are conservative don't see that UN membership helps us very much, and people on the left can't get enough of it. I mean, the liberal-leaning Democrats believe 90-10 that being in the United Nations is a good thing, whereas the conservative-leaning Republicans believe 65-35 that it actually isn't. It's a very politically divisive issue and should be. We should kind of focus on being America only right now, particularly in light of our financial problems and other weaponization issues. But they are globalist organizations, and they exist, just to create jobs and opportunities for people to make lots of money, exert control of your lives, and then also party it up quite a bit, which takes us to our next piece here on the AmRad Pod Saturday Grab Bag Edition, which comes this time officially from the New York Times, which was at one point a newspaper. Headline: Dance poles and leopard print walls, love motels, ready rooms for a climate summit. This is all about an upcoming climate summit from the United Nations. It's known as COP30. It's the 30th UN Climate Change Conference. Now, we get to very much into the atmospherics because it is the New York Times, which was at one point a newspaper. Quote, the suite with its crisp white sheets and tiny soaps could almost pass for any no-frills hotel room. That is, if it weren't for the mirrored ceiling and the dance pole by the bed. The Love Motel, like others across Belém, and that's in Brazil, is now preparing rooms that range from the sensual to the raunchy for a different kind of guest. Diplomats and climate scientists, civil servants and environmental activists, all descending on the city in November. Now, this summit nears, there is uncertainty about whether or not there will be enough space for all the mucky mucks, all the globalists who are so concerned about the climate change to have places to stay. Rooms are going up to $1,000 a night. Brazil also struck a deal with some cruise ships to add some additional beds. There's new hotels that are currently being built and other old ones being refurbished. Schools are being retrofitted with beds, sporting clubs being transformed into dormitories. Still, with less than 4 months ago, much of the new lodging is still not complete and the city is thousands of beds short of its target. That's how big of a boondoggle this is. This is going to bring in tens of thousands of high rollers on their private jets to talk about the climate and how all the gasoline exhaust that they just pumped into the atmosphere totally was necessary, and they totally should get to stay at these love hotels and dance on the stripper poles and fornicate with other members of other collections of other countries because of international relations. Back at this motel, which is called the Motel Secreto, the secret motel, see, I habla, Mr. Costa prepared one suite by adding bunk beds and taking down an oversized frame picture of a person's rear end that hung on the wall. But he stopped short of getting rid of the dance pole and the leopard print wallpaper and the red heart-shaped hot tub. Quote, I have to think about what comes after COP30. I can't just spend a ton of money and then tear everything out, which makes sense economically. I mean, this is a massive event for 12 days. 12 days, these elitist jerks are going to go down and party it up in November in Brazil, where it's going to be very festive and the tropical climate there will be outstanding. And they'll talk about how they want to save the earth from the evil sun monster. And to support this event that lasts for a week and a half, they're currently building hotels. It shows just how much money this complete hoax actually involves. It is a hoax. It's ridiculous. It's disgusting. And now they're trying to tread into our territory where on this program, on the American Radicals podcast, we endeavor to give you the biblical worldview. I do have one today. It's not coming up quite yet, but they're trying to introduce a spiritual revival as it pertains to climate paganism, which is the subject of the next story, which comes from Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness. This climate study made a big error. One piece of data was to blame. I'm sorry, I picked the wrong one. Here it is. What if we need spiritual revival, not technology, to address climate change? Now, this is rather disturbing. This woman here who's pictured, her name is Joanna Macy. She died at the age of 96 this past month. So she was an American scholar and an activist. She had early encounters with Buddhism, and that changed not only the course of her career, but popular understanding of how we might solve the most urgent environmental issues of our time. Now, Joanna Macy applied Buddhist teachings to help people understand what they are not free-floating individuals, but integral to a much larger whole, composed of every living being across time. Don't you see? It takes all of us. We're all in this together. Her blueprint for climate action holds that we will not be able to solve the climate issue and its intertwined problems with technology and policy alone. We need spiritual revival. We need to actually worship like climate pagans. And if we do that, if we worship Mother Gaia, then we might be able to stop the SUVs from pumping out all that carbon. Now, growing up, she spent idyllic summers on her grandfather's Western New York farm. That was an escape from New York City, where at other times she was probably writing in to the ethicist about her bisexual husband. But after graduating from Wellesley College, because she's an elite liberal woman, or as we like to declare her,
Classic awful AWFL, affluent white female liberals. They're a scourge.
She went to work for the CIA, another globalist organization. She went to India and she helped resettle Tibetan Buddhist refugees. During the Cold War, as nuclear weapons spread around the world, she found the Nuclear Guardianship Project. Beyond opposing nuclear proliferation, she advocated for treating radioactive waste as moral and cultural commitment that spanned generations. It takes all of us. Her argument is simple. Pain reveals what we love. The problem, she said, was when people imprison themselves in numbness or distraction to avoid the pain. Now, to a certain extent, I sort of agree with this. I mean, I really harp on the fact that people are addicted to comfort and they're addicted to convenience. And if you want to actually solve problems, you're going to have to become inconvenienced and get comfortable being uncomfortable. I don't make my religion out of that, though. That's just called citizenship. But as it comes to worshiping Mother Gaia, Mother Earth, like the Avatar movies, well, then I guess it's appropriate because that's exactly what they did there. Let's go back to the other Washington Post piece, because democracy dies in darkness. This is, again, further evidence of just how fake this climate stuff, these climate concerns that justify spending billions of dollars and traveling to Brazil and meeting up at sex hotels at an hourly rate and dancing on the stripper poles and having fun with the mirrors on the ceiling. It's totally legit. We're trying to save the earth because the hashtag science supports it, but it doesn't. Quote, headline, this climate study made a big error. One piece of data was to blame, and the entire study was rendered obsolete and inappropriate for consideration. But it did get peer reviewed. So let's dig into this one. A year ago, a paper published in the Journal of Nature made a sweeping claim. The world economy was on track to lose 19% of our global gross domestic product by 2050. So in the next 25 years, we're going to lose 1/5 of all of our output compared with what would have been without climate change. So if we took all of that carbon out of the atmosphere, we got rid of all the billions of people, I guess we would have been more productive, apparently. That doesn't make sense. You need people to become more productive, but don't let logic get in the way of a communist leftist. By 2175 years, the high emissions would lead to, we would lose 2/3 of all of our output. But there was just one problem. According to a new analysis, the paper's findings were flawed. There were massive damages predicted by the paper, were predicated on data errors stemming from one country, Uzbekistan. So because they messed up the Uzbekistan inputs, the entire study, which made it through peer review, as you will find out, they had faulty conclusions that are inaccurate, 100% wrong, and still it had the narrative. So concerns about the large magnitude of the changes were already clear in the peer review process, but after some back and forth with the authors, the reviewer later approved the paper. So they knew that it was wrong. They knew that the data was no good. They knew that the conclusions that they had drawn from their erroneous study were completely inaccurate and inappropriate, and still the narrative was more important. We have to get people concerned, because unless we stop the production of automobiles, unless we transition and remove all of the energy that's necessary for our cultures to thrive and produce economic output, then our economic output will go down. We need to eliminate all the people that do all the economic output. And if we don't eliminate all the people, then our output will go down. It's nonsensical. It's moronic, but past peer review. And I guess that's all that matters, because it's totally legit, which got me, sort of thinking about this other peer-reviewed experiment that went on. It's not related to the global warming and Mother Gaia and the madness connected to that. But I do have a couple clips, and this is from the James Lindsay experiment, where it comes to getting their papers published in peer-reviewed journals. And I want to give those a play just to show how inauthentic so many of these journals are actually.
Since approximately June of 2017, I, along with two other concerned academics, Peter Boghossian and Helen Pluckrose, have been writing intentionally broken academic papers and submitting them to highly respected journals in fields that study gender, race, sexuality, and similar topics. We did this to expose a political corruption that's taken hold of the university. By this point, several of these papers have been accepted in highly respected journals, and one that claims that dog humping incidents can be taken as evidence of rape culture has been officially honored as excellent scholarship. I'm not going to lie to you, we had a lot of fun with this project.
The reviewers are worried that we didn't respect the dog's privacy. That's the concern. We respected the channel.
That's one clip. So they actually wrote these academic articles and submitted them to legitimate, credible, quote unquote, air quote, credible sources for peer review. And once they're peer reviewed, they get published. And if you're in the academic world, getting published is a big deal. That allows you to get tenure, that is really tied to your ability to thrive in that community, to be professionally respected and go around, do lectures, be paid for it. These three teamed up and wrote about how dogs humping each other at the park is rape culture. And they got published. And they actually did a long-term study themselves. They educated themselves on how to actually penetrate into these journals. And they studied on this gender madness, the grievance culture madness, and they were able to then easily get multiple papers published, which is the second piece, and we'll give this one a play.
The best I can tap into is that there's this kind of like religious architecture in their mind where privilege is sin, privilege is evil, and then they've identified education as the place where it has to be fixed. So you can come up with these really nasty arguments like, well, let's put white kids in chains on the floor at school as an educational opportunity. And if you frame it in terms of overcoming privilege, and then you frame their resistance, that they won't want this to happen to them, that they would complain about this. If you frame that in terms of, oh, they only complain about that because they're privileged and they can't handle it because their privilege made them weak, then it's right in. Papers started getting in.
You have got to be me that this happened.
By March, with 2 papers accepted and 1 published, it would be fair to say that we had become accepted grievance scholars. By June, it was 3, with 1 having been officially honored by the journal as excellent scholarship. By July, it was 5. By August, 7.
They actually rewrote Mein Kampf, and they did it from a grievance standpoint, like a gender, and got it accepted. And that's how absurd it was. So again, just making the point that so many of these quote unquote credible sources, and they take these studies, they're not real. And yet we're using that information. The UN takes that information and crafts policy that's going to affect the entire earth. And the United States is funding that. Well, I mean, between 20 and 25% of the funding for the United Nations comes from you, the taxpayer. So take that for what it's worth. All right, I do have one more story to get to. It's actually a couple different videos because recently a friend of mine, Cheryl Atkinson, she's been trying to pump out her trials and tribulations. If those who don't know, Cheryl Atkinson, very credible journalist, multi Emmy winner, has covered a lot of things in the health atmosphere. She was one of the first members of the media to actually sit down with me, came and visited me at my house, and did a very nice interview and published it. She was the one who actually broke John Dodson, the OG whistleblower of the Fast and Furious ATF scandal. And there's this childhood game you play, like you love your parents, you would never replace your parents. But if you had to replace your parents, who would be your dad and who would be your mom? Well, I think I'd make Cheryl Atkinson my mom. She's just a lovely woman. We've stayed in contact. And as an aside, Tom Selleck would totally be my dad because Magnum PI, come on, let's get real. But this is a summary, and I want to reintroduce it because she had the government come after her and spy on her. And this is a person who was on the nightly news doing very high-profile cases, but she treaded on the toes of the federal government in the wrong way, and they didn't hesitate to make the process the punishment, to weaponize the processes like the J6 Jensens and the Brian Driscolls and the Chris Myers of the world. So a couple different clips I want to play because I want to highlight Cheryl's trials and tribulations because they are certainly worth highlighting.
Before we knew the government had subpoenaed secretly records of AP reporters, before we knew they'd spied on James Rosen of Fox News, but during the same time period, I was reporting on controversies under the Obama administration and, quite frankly, other controversies, so I didn't know who would be spying on me if somebody was. I never suspected that was the case, but intelligence sources 2 in a row in the same time period came to me and said that the Obama administration was violating civil rights through surveillance in ways that most Americans would find shocking. Both of them used similar phrases, didn't even know each other, and suggested that I was probably being monitored. Sounded crazy because it just never occurred to me. I won't belabor the whole journey, but long story short, through a series of forensics exams, the first one being an intelligence community insider who was able to locate software that had been implanted in my computer, intrusions that have been going on illegally at the hands of the government using government IP addresses and government proprietary software, were found in my computer in a long-term monitoring effort, at least one and perhaps more than one. I've since learned the government is surveilling so many people, journalists, politicians, members of Congress, and citizens. These operations are probably tripping over each other and crossing paths.
So a little bit of insight. Cheryl Atkinson caught people putting wiring outside of her house. She caught people remotely accessing her computer and actually videoed it on her phone, seeing files get deleted. She has the hard evidence. She's invested over $1 million into investigating this because she was making the wrong people angry and they felt aggrieved. And they didn't hesitate for 1 second to use the power at their fingertips to go after a journalist for just doing her job. It gets worse because the question is, does she ever get justice? I mean, we have a new president in here now. The new appetite for transparency, code word, right? Like the democracy is a code word for the communists for things I like. Transparency. We want actual transparency. Are you being transparent with us about what actually happened during the past? When you have access to those things, why haven't you turned them over? And beyond transparency, we need accountability, and yet we haven't got it. Even if it is 6 to 8 months late, and it's because you took a PR hit, not because you did it for the right reasons at the right time or in the right way. This is the second one for Cheryl, and then we'll close it out here on the Saturday grab bag.
I've been suing, but these are very hard cases. I thought you have the forensic evidence, the government comes to you and apologizes, case closed. But no, you have to get to court, to a jury, and to do that, you have to get discovery. To get that, the court requires certain things. The burden is very high for someone like me, spending over $1 million to try to bring justice, which means they want you to know and have all the documents of who personally did it and ordered it, when you couldn't possibly have the information without discovery. But they won't give you discovery till you bring them the information to justify the discovery. So this has gone in circles for over a decade. It's just sort of this never-ending journey with the Department of Justice fighting and delaying every step of the way.
There's no excuse. This information exists. It's not in some burn bag that the FBI director is going to have to root around in like a raccoon and find in a secret room that he was shown by the person who tapped him on the shoulder. The FBI, other members of the intelligence community were involved in persecuting this woman. And she's been fighting it as long as she possibly can. She's been in a position as a member of the media to spotlight it, to use a megaphone, and still she hasn't gotten justice. She was told, you need to give us the names of the people in order for us to give you the discovery, which will give you the names of the people. Because we got to follow the policy. We got to follow the protocols and the procedures, Steve. Don't you know? This is how things work. Because if we don't do that, then when the communists get in charge, they're going to bastardize the system just like you did. Oh, you mean like when they told my buddy Garrett O'Boyle that there was an allegation against him, so he had to be suspended indefinitely forever for over 1,000 days, intercepted mid-transfer, had his household goods seized? That certainly wasn't by the policy. None of this is. And we're back now to the Cold Civil War. One side accepts the battlefield conditions. They are suboptimal. They aren't fair. Life isn't fair, though. If we do not accept and embrace this and use the opportunity that is at our fingertips and remove people from duty right away, total personnel warfare over at the FBI, instead of waiting to be embarrassed by Kyle Seraphin when he posts on X, to withdraw all funding from the United Nations. They're not doing anything good for us at all. To reject whole cloth these academic studies, to actually prosecute crime, actually prosecute the people who are helping to facilitate illegal aliens evading capture and removal from within our borders. Unless we do this, unless we take the opportunity to do that, we will have not fulfilled the mandate, and there will be a punishment. There will be a reckoning in next year's midterm elections, and the following in the general presidential election year. And the people who are in positions of authority will frankly deserve it, and I won't shed a tear for them. Now, we do have a nice biblical worldview today and also a palate cleanse that I want to get to. So today's comes from Hebrews chapter 4, verses 12 and 13. For the word of God is alive and active, sharper than any double-edged sword. It penetrates even to dividing soul and spirit, joints and marrow. It judges the thoughts and attitudes of the heart. Nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him to whom we must give account. It's all about being honest. Let the truth have its day. You're never quite alone. You say having integrity is doing the right thing when nobody's around. It's because you know that somebody's always around and somebody's always watching. As long as we promote and we exist in a world where truth is not the most important thing, where you can just make up academic studies, you can make up and justify doing things like elevating the worst possible candidates for position, people who abuse their authority, and then firing that arrow, seeing where it lands, and drawing the target around it to say, that's exactly where it should have been. That's exactly what the American people want. Lying to their face, you will not be rewarded. I don't care what the sycophants around you are tapping you on the shoulder and saying, yes, boss, you're doing a great job. I don't care if you're doing that in your own personal life and you have your own set of hype men and an entourage. In your deepest, darkest, most private moments, you know what is true and you know what isn't. And you aren't even alone in those deep and dark moments. So always aspire to tell the truth and do the right thing at the right time in the right way for the right reasons. And then we can always have a future that's something that we can always be proud of. So that'll sum it up for today on the Saturday Grab Bag Palate Cleanse. As I'm about to jet out of here from this latest episode and make my way out to the first and only preseason Pop Warner football game. And then next week, guys, next week in August in Florida, we're kicking it off here. And I can't help but think of how they came up with the idea for snacks when they started kicking off recreational sports. Neither did this comedian.
Who started snacks? I'd have a snack my entire childhood. Pre-game, halftime, post-game. Orange slices, gotta have orange slices. There's a snack list. I had no idea there's a snack list till my first practice ever. I told all the parents we're not having snacks. This mom ran me down in the parking lot. We got that snacks, it's gonna be a snack list. I said, no, we're not having snacks. No, we're gonna have snacks. See, Jeremy can't play a whole game without a snack. Jeremy needs a snack, or Jeremy can't play the whole game. I'm going, Jeremy's not that good. He'll never play a whole game. Why don't y'all eat at home and come late? How about that, huh? You know what started the whole phenomenon, kids, sports, and snacks? You know what started all that? Soccer. It did, because you have a snack when you're playing soccer because your hands are clean. Explain that to your neighbor on the way out of here.
Communists love soccer. It's a commie sport. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be doing real football, not that fancy European football. American football, which is where I'm headed. And I hope you're headed somewhere really great this weekend, guys. I hope you have a nice and safe weekend. Back with you Tuesday here on rumble.com/amradpon. Until then, have a good one.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amrad.